Well, hey everybody, we are here with Tyler in Georgia, outside Atlanta, for our next video question and answer video series. I think the V words throw me every time I try and do this intro with viewer and video, and I interchange them, but he's going to be asking me 3 questions. And I've really put no parameters on questions. Like, anybody can ask me 3 questions. So I'm surprised that by now nobody has really tried to get a personal question or anything out of me, but everybody's been doing some good questions. So no pressure, no pressure to bring good ones today. But what is your first one, Tyler?
Okay, maneuvering deceased people. I'm sure confined spaces and hallways can be tricky enough, but what about staircases and very large people? Is this difficult for the average funeral worker who is not a regular at the gym?
There are devices, and sometimes some people use them, some people don't. It is costly to have a lot of accoutrement on at your call, beck and call at your facility, where you have cots that are for over 1,000, or you have specialty body movers, or some of the things there's cots that are like chairs. You'll see hospitals can use them too. They're like a chair to maneuver, and they have wheels on the back. So it almost looks like a wheelchair type thing, but you would seat the person to go down steps so that they're not on a flat board trying to move them. And so some places will have those, but you have to do a high volume of calls to have a lot of those things, because they cost a lot of money. And so a lot of people will just use, they're called body movers, or they're basically like a backboard with handles like into them that you can maybe maneuver the person to the cot, because cots are not very forgiving. There are cots where kind of the head will break down, so you can make it a little smaller to move through into different areas and then open it back up. Or cots are made so you can stand them upright to move people around. So there's a lot of different styles and types, but a lot of people have a hard time investing. Say you've got a small town funeral home that do 70, 80 calls a year. For them to invest thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into a specialty cot, it just doesn't happen very often, because you don't have the revenue to do that always. So people find ways. Sheets to me are one of the biggest things that you can use. Sheets to kind of wrap somebody up like a little burrito to lift from the center point, rather than have people on 2 corners. You can gather together to lift. Moving anybody who's over a certain weight, it doesn't matter. It just depends on where they are and how you have to move them. If somebody is in let's say a bathroom, I've had people 300 pounds and they're in a bathroom. 300 pounds is not that large, but you can only get so many people into that bathroom to move the person out. So some of the things are situational, on top of size and everything. Like you said, you can't really get your cot in, lay it next to the person, put them on, and pull it out very easily with just 2 people. You have to kind of move the person. So sometimes what's even works, you lay a sheet down next to where the person is, you move them onto the sheet and kind of drag that sheet. You kind of use the sheet as a sled almost, just to kind of scoot the person out to maybe a larger space, out to a main room, like if the kitchen's there, or a bathroom, or the middle of the bedroom, where then you can maneuver more people and lay the cot alongside them, and then use manpower to lift them up. So sometimes you just have to work with your space and what you have, explaining to the family, if they're there, we need to just move this person in this way, and doing the most respectful thing. I've heard people that are like, oh, we wrapped him up and kind of dragged him down the stairs. I'm like, you did not. You can't do that. But to use something under them to maneuver them and kind of snake them out into a larger room, I don't think is disrespectful, when there's literally no other option, depending on the size of the space. So I think you get creative over time. Sometimes situations seem like they would be an easy way to maybe move somebody. Like if somebody's in a recliner. To me, when somebody is in a seated position, it's not very hard to move them because you basically scoop a leg and kind of scoop their arm and go straight off onto a cot and then lay them out flat. But if they're sitting in some of that, that egg crate styrofoam stuff, that's mushy. Well, the person seats down in and you can't slide on it. And so if it's under them on a bed, even getting them, moved off a bed is really difficult. So there's some situations that things that comforted the person really work against us in getting them out of the situation. But, it's doable. So there's devices you can get, and that some people do have. Manpower sometimes is your best friend, just because even 150 pounds can be difficult to move in different situations. So you just kind of try your best and see what you can do, and be respectful. I think that's the number one thing, is because people are watching, whether it's the family, whether it's the police, whether it's whoever. I had somebody write to me recently and tell me about their loved one who was quite heavy and had died. And the people working didn't realize that they were moving a member of the person's family that was overseeing or something. And they were in the backyard getting the person to the car. And they were talking about this fat person and how heavy, and making jokes about the individual. And I think that's the number one thing. You don't know who's watching. And it's not like, that's not okay. It might be the middle of the night and this person's 500 pounds or whatever. And it's not like your ideal situation, obviously, but this is kind of part of your job. You're there to take care of people. This is a person, not, somebody who died to inconvenience your life. And so I think there's people who forget and have lapses of judgment, and especially maybe some younger people who maybe aren't matured enough, or even older people who aren't mature enough to know like things are not okay to say and do and such. So definitely there's some bad situations that happen out there. So
okay,
yeah, that was a long answer. I feel like
work with what you have, I guess.
you do. You have to. I think that is so applicable across the whole business, because sure, it'd be great to have, makeup for every situation and fluid for every situation and vehicles for, sure, there's things for specialty situations, but everybody can't afford to have all of it. I do know some areas where they have gotten bariatric cots, like one funeral home or several funeral homes have gone in and bought like a bariatric cot that can hold up to, 1,000 or however many pounds. And that way, if anybody in like an hour radius or something needs that style cot, they can then call that funeral home that it's stored at, get it to go bring that individual into their care, because those cots are much wider. They are just more specialized. So you don't want to use it on every single removal, because it's going to be harder to get through a lot of doors. But to have it access to one when you do need it, maybe once a year, once every 2 years, if you're a really small funeral home, it's so critical to have. So I think that's been a great thing, is seeing funeral homes work together to maybe have some specialty equipment in different areas that you can get if you need it.
That's good.
Yeah. So what's your number 2?
Let's see. Appearances and presentations. How do you know where to draw the line when determining if you simply won't be able to make someone look presentable to his or her loved ones in the public? Can you usually make that determination prior to beginning preparation of the person, or?
There's something to be said about a bath. Sometimes you'll get an individual, especially car accidents, because you get a lot of like little abrasions from glass or road rash, things of that nature, where you really can't see where damage is. You get somebody who was maybe thrown from a vehicle, they're covered in dirt and leaves and, all sorts of things that really obscure what the individual truly looks like underneath. So just bathing them and getting the glass washed off. So like if I have I will always bathe. If there's any glass and stuff, I always give a good bath. Make sure there's none underneath them, on them, in their hair when I start, because if they've gone through the windshield or something, that glass just goes into a million little bitty pieces and it does a lot of damage. But once you get that blood off, sometimes you realize, oh, I think it's not that bad. Like I can work with this person and we can make them presentable. One person's judgment is not always going to be the same as another. You know, someone may, let's say they're having a bad day, like a funeral director is having a bad day, tired, they get an individual in their care that's kind of that borderline. They may be inclined to say, yeah, they're not going to be presentable. We can't, you know, you can come see their hand, but we're not going to be able to make them presentable. But you can get another director who has nothing going on. They got all this time on their hands and they get the same individual and they're like, yes, I see a challenge and I have lots of time. I'm going to put in more work and I can do this. And they may make that person presentable. So it depends on the person and the, you know, the day. I know that that's not a fair answer and it doesn't seem right, but it's kind of, you know, I feel like it's like the ER where someone may be doing compressions a lot longer than another person, or, you know, you're going to get people at different moments on different days that have more, you know, even more skill, where one embalmer doesn't have the skill to restore something that another person does. So I had an individual once and his face had been eaten off by turtles. He had floated in the lake. He had had a heart attack, fell in the lake, like, you know, normal death. He just happened to float in the water and the turtles had eaten off a lot of the soft tissue on his face. I deemed him not viewable. I mean, there was nothing there to even cosmetize. But now later in my career, I could dry that tissue out, wax over, you know, make a new face if the family wanted to kind of pay for the extensive restoration, because that takes a lot of time. Huge restorations can take 25, 40 hours to do. And so, you know, it is a little more cost if you get to a large restoration. So some of it's just having a communication with the family. You know, do you want to just see them presentable for you, or do you want to make them viewable for the whole public? And kind of like how much effort do they want you to give? So honest communication is like the biggest, truly, because as long as the family's going to be imagining the worst, and you can't even know what to imagine. I feel like when you have some of these accidents and things, like, is their head gone? Is their nose gone? Is their face gone? Are they, you know, like there's no way to imagine, because one person in a car accident is not going to look like another person. You know, like there's just so many different variations on damage. So I think just having the communication with the family and see what their end goal is that they really want. Like, do they want to view? Do they want to just spend some time to say goodbye? Or do they want to have a full-blown everybody view kind of thing? And a lot of those times I will do the embalming and then I'll come back later to look at the person, because removing yourself from the situation and coming back in, you have fresh eyes on it. Like if I've been cosmetizing for like 2-3 hours, I have to walk away and then come back, because you almost get so critical and you make things way worse in your own mind, or even going and getting somebody else and coming in and saying, okay, what's your first reaction? If they're like, oh my gosh, they look amazing, you're like, oh, so maybe I'm just being too critical and too, you know, conscious of different things, that maybe a laceration is not as bad looking as I'm thinking, or maybe coloring is not as bad as I'm thinking it is, because you're going to be your own worst critic when it comes to any of that, because you want perfection and you can't get to perfection, but you can get perfectly recognizable. And that's one thing that one of the professional embalmers has said is, you don't need perfect, but you need perfectly recognizable. And you need them, you know, as long as the family can recognize them despite the damage, then you've done your job. So it's, you know, it's It's a hard situation regardless. If they, you can't give them their loved one in full perfection form, it's, hard.
You're probably as disappointed as they are, probably.
You are like, there's been very few times, and it was more early in my career that I told people, no, you can't see them, because at that point, I didn't know. I had not seen the possibilities. I had never been around an embalmer who had done advanced restoration at that point. Like, it was early on, and I'd only been around so many embalmers, and I didn't know the possibilities that you could do and the extent and the tools and the tricks and things that were available. Now I've gone to seminars and trainings and things on that, and I know what people can do and what the potential is. It just, sometimes small town funeral homes never are exposed to that, never have training. You only get maybe one call a year that you would need that skill, so you can't hone it.
Right.
Make it, you can't be exceptional at something you only do once a year, once every 2 years. So that gets really hard, I think, for people, but that's why sometimes people specialize in that. And then you call those people and you bring them in to do some of those things, because it is such a specialty to do. So, yeah.
Work with what you got and do the best you can.
Yeah, this is number 2, same answer. Work with what you got and do the best you can. Well, what's your number 3 question?
Okay, dollars and cents. Elaborate burials versus inexpensive cremations.
Yes.
Would you say it is still worthwhile to even pursue a career in the profession in terms of job availability and income potential? Do you see the industry evolving to most people going with no frills cremations, with no wakes, no viewings, no funeral services, or what do you see?
I think we're all very diverse, and I think you're going to find traditionalists, no matter what, where they don't believe in cremation. Like, there's people who cremation is just not an option. They don't like the fire, they don't like the water, they don't like anything to do with it. Then you have people who don't want burial, like, just point blank, they just don't. And it has nothing to do with a service choice, but that disposition choice to them is just not negotiable. So I think, there's a little segment that, because of cost, they do select cremation rather than burial. But a lot of people choose that direct cremation, that no service type of cremation, because it is the most inexpensive. But if a burial option was the same cost, inexpensive, would they choose the same thing, is the question. But because there's a difference between those costs now, I think they choose sometimes that cremation because of cost. So it'd be interesting if, I'm hoping eventually one day all the dispositions will be about the same. And it'll
Yes.
just be the service choices that are going to add or subtract your costs, because you can do a cremation service that's the same as a burial service. Visitation is going to be the same price for both. Funeral's the same price for both. It's just that you don't have as much merchandise with a cremation, because you don't have a vault, and then you don't have any of the cemetery items. You don't have a burial space and opening and closing and the headstone and all those things, unless you bury the cremated remains after. And those are where some of the cost gets, quite exponential, where a cemetery is $2,000 to open and close the grave space, or, it's that price gets added in. And that's, people think, oh, funerals are so expensive. No, it's the process of burying somebody that's expensive, but it's not the funeral home charge. The cemetery charge is often added in there. You have a $500 obituary, you have, or $20,000 if you want in the New York Times. And so there's all these other factors that factor into that final number. Luncheons, so you'll hear people that are like, I spent $18,000 on a funeral. Well, yeah, you had a $5,000 luncheon bill because you hired a caterer, and you spent $2,000 on this and stuff that were not funeral home charges. So some of that is really skewed because of how it's presented, and it's not always just the funeral home charges. So I think there's just it's not full truths to what is being explained, I think, in some of those situations with numbers and such. But I think definitely there's a role for people in the future, but I think the role of the funeral director is going to change. Look, 50 years ago, it was kind of an order taker. You came in, you told me what day and time you wanted your visitation, you selected a casket, you picked what church wanted your service or where you wanted your service, you picked your cemetery, and we just went forward with it. It was really kind of boom, 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 and then the next call, boom, 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 next call. It was much more cookie cutter of a situation. Right. Then you added in cremation, and that became a disposition choice. Well, then we kind of killed ourselves within the business by making this huge differentiation and creating this more financially available option. But if you give somebody the option to spend way less money, a lot of people are just going to go with it without thinking of that long term of not gathering and not reflecting on a life and not going through these motions that we need to kind of as a society. So I think in the next 10 years, we're really going to see how that direct cremation choice that has been there the last 10, 15 years is going to affect the next generation. Because I think there's going to be a lot of people who found there was an absence of formality and of honoring that life because their grandma was just cremated and nothing happened. Nothing changed in terms of, stopping and reflecting and gathering and doing anything kind of in her memory. Like she was cremated and then they kind of moved on. And I think that generation then is going to feel like they were robbed from something. So then when their parents die, I think they're going to be more inclined to do something, whether it's, really do stuff within the funeral home or on their own. But that's why funeral directors, I think, are going to be more of an event planner and really dive into that role by meeting those needs with the event centers and helping people kind of come up with solutions to what they need rather than kind of just taking the order of, okay, a direct cremation. Because a lot of funeral directors assume if somebody wants cremation that they want a direct cremation, but direct cremation is not a disposition, it's a service option. So when I talk to cremation families, I say, oh, you want to, I say, oh, we just simply want a cremation. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? Do you want to see your loved one before they're cremated? Do you want to gather together? Do you want visitation? Do you want to have a service? Do you want a graveside? Do you want any of these things? And I almost make them tell me, no, they really don't want those things, rather than assuming they're not understanding that they're even an option. Because I meet with families still that don't even realize they can have a visitation with their loved one present and then have them cremated later. And they're like, I can do that? And I'm like, well, yes, you can have them there. Just because they chose cremation doesn't mean it's a disposal of your loved one immediately. You can still have them present. You can gather, you can have a service, you can do whatever you like, and then have them cremated at the end rather than buried. And so people are actually surprised that they can do that still. It's just the options, I think, are not fully explained, which is one of the reasons I think for doing my channel is getting information in front of more people as to their options, because I just feel like funeral directors sometimes do not, really present everything. They just assume that a family doesn't want to do anything because they're choosing cremation, when I just really don't think that's the situation. But I think financially, like I said, I think it'll all balance out at some point, the costs. I think we may have less rooftops and we may do more online where you're interacting. I think especially after, COVID-19, where we are interacting more online with doctors and with, funeral personnel and stuff anyway. I think, saying, hey, Tyler, I'm so sorry about your mom. Do you want to come to the funeral home or do you want to meet virtually and we can do our arrangements, a conference? Or do you want to just fill out, if it is a direct cremation or something, do you want to fill out the paperwork online so we can complete the paperwork we need? And you can just get online and do that. A lot of low budget cremation services are that way now because they're hands off. And that's why they're so low budget, is because you're not paying somebody to sit down with anybody and you don't have a rooftop for that business to function. the person goes online, they pay online, they submit all their forms online, and they will get mailed their loved one or schedule a time to pick them up at such and such location. So it's this weird disposal transaction to me. And I just, like, it doesn't set well with me. I don't understand how people do it, but it is a choice that people make, you know, a lot for their loved ones. Sometimes it is a financial choice, but other times that's just seems more convenient for them, I guess, to take care of a loved one. I don't know. Some of the business is going a little sideways. So you know, it'll be interesting in a few years to see how it all kind of evolves forward. So.
I just don't understand why people don't want to spend any money on a once in a lifetime event. I don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, I did a video on, you know, why do you want, like, when your mom's living and she's dying and you want the best for her and you want the best situation and the best care and the best hospice or the best doctors, but as soon as she's dead, you want the lowest price thing you could do for her. I don't get it. Like, I don't get that mentality. And it's not that it's bad. It's not that I just don't understand it, because it doesn't make sense to me how people switch their thinking of quality for somebody as soon as they're dead. And that's
Right.
gross as soon as they're dead. Like, oh, she took her last breath. Now she's disgusting and she's a dead body. Like, that's still your mom. It doesn't matter if she's breathing or not. That's still your mom. Like, I don't know how that changes in your mind, but yeah. So there's some things I think I'll never understand. And I've seen it hundreds of times. I just don't understand it. I don't get the mentality, because I myself would never have that thinking. But I can appreciate other people do and respect that. It's just never going to be my way of thinking for somebody that I love. Yeah, it's odd, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't relate. I can't relate to that. Sorry.
No. Well, and like, that's when people price shop out, and you look for the lowest price. Well, are they the lowest price for a reason? Like, why are they the lowest? What are you not getting, or what is not included, or what is not, you need to ask yourself those things. Like, if a car is only $500, why is that car only $500? Like, does it come with the tires? Is the engine in there? And I think the same is with service anywhere. You know, why is this less expensive? How am I getting like a prime rib for only $3? Like, what cow is this coming from that my prime rib is $3? You know what I mean? Like, these situations pop up and people just jump on them. I step back and wonder, though, why, like, it's too good to be true. Sometimes numbers are too good to be true. So
Right.
It'll be interesting how it all plays out. And I think, we're going to see government have to step in with some things, because they already do take care of a lot of individuals that die. And some states have completely stopped any help benefits altogether for death, because it's not even worth it. It's like, so minimal. It wasn't even worth doing the paperwork for it to benefit the funeral home. So it'll be interesting to see also, like, how that plays out, how people who get, state funding and state aid as they're living, how that's going to kind of reflect over, if ever there's going to be like a death assistance type thing that really is of value within states. I don't know. There's some areas I'm interested to see if they develop, if they fall to the wayside, and how they continue on. Because if somebody knows they can say, well, I'm just not going to claim my mom and she's going to be cremated on the state's penny, and then I can still go pick up her cremated remains. Are more people going to do that? Is that still going to be acceptable? Because it's not acceptable to me that should be an option, that you can opt out of taking care of your loved one at all, and then get to have the say in what happens to them after you didn't want to care for them. Like, they're just, I don't know. There's some parameters in some areas that I just, you just wonder on, and it'll be interesting to see, with some time, how things will develop. A lot of unknowns.
Time will tell.
Yes, it will. So, well, thank you for questions and for meeting me today. So,
Well, thanks for addressing them.
of course, they're good. They're good. I love when people have them written down, and I'm like, ooh, they really thought about these.
Organized.
Yeah, I'm so type A. It's scary.
Same here.
Cool. Well, thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it. Coming at us from Georgia. So keep an eye out, guys, for the next video in this series and see what state we're in next. So we got a cat visiting us. That's so fun. Well, bye, guys.